Well, I'm delighted to be here. I mean, it's exciting. I spoke to a community group last week as well, and keeping people connected and looking towards the future is an important part of what we need to be doing right now. So, thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. I was telling them all the things that you have done for not just the University of Southern Mississippi, but for so much for a lot of community because you are an excellent clinician. You have conducted several choirs, many festivals, including here in Alabama. You have taken the choirs to Nationals ACDA, regionals ACDA and NCCO as well. And you have worked really closely with great composers. And I was telling them that actually you were my inspiration of working with new compositions with the Huntsville Master Chorale. We have this initiative, a choral competition contest, and that we mainly support the North Alabama composers, and we commission composers here in North Alabama. But this year we're going national because I think composers need support of the arts, and the collaborative effort between our organization and them I think is very valuable. We have make a lot of premieres with them. So, and I will thank you because working with new compositions, meanwhile I was in Southern Miss, was very enlightening to me. And I really enjoyed that process. So you work with Mulholland, you work with Benjamin Harlan, you work with, the Estonian composer,
Senator Kurvitz.
Kurvit as well. And so many, tell us about that, your collaboration with composers.
Well, I can just tell you that I added up the other day how many extended works I've done in 20 years. And I was astounded that the choirs here have sung 60 multi-movement works in 20 years. And there's certainly the representative 10, the Messiah, Carmina Burana, the things that everybody's going to sing, and also the things that everybody will buy a ticket to. I mean, that's pretty easy business to program things that people know and they want to come here. But the new composers are struggling to find ensembles to sing their literature. So not only have I done commissions, but I have tried to, as Patricia said, to do premieres of oratorio, of extended works, because I know how difficult it is for living composers to find someone to do their work. And in Europe, you would find them certainly performing the masterworks of Europe, maybe 40% of the time, but 50 or 60% of the time, they would be doing the music of today. And I think Americans, we tend to look back to Europe. And a lot of people like me will do 70, 80, even 90% of music of antiquity versus music of now when it comes to orchestra and chorus, particularly. And so for me to say, I probably in the last 10 years have done 40 or 50% of the modern era. Also 40% of history. I don't leave it out, but my percentage after I've been traveling over the years has increased. And I do like to give composers a chance to be heard. So the hard part is finding good music. I think a lot of people commission pieces and secretly they really don't like the music after they get it. And so I do think the decision you make about who you're employing, what parameters you give them for the composition, including text, and their reputation and examples of their work before. But I do think a competition like you're talking about is a brilliant idea. It's not a new idea. People all over the world have done that, but it's given composers a chance for their music to be actually considered. Sometimes they get feedback on compositions, and ultimately somebody gets chosen for a performance. So all that's very important.
Yes, I think we've been very lucky to have very good compositions and receiving some compositions. Last year we did Ignition, celebrating the NASA, I would say the lunar endeavor. So it was very interesting composition that we received that year. And we have commissioned Michael John Trotta, Hal Hobson, so good composers as well. So we're very fortunate to have that, and I know it's very interesting as in the creating part, not just to, for us to really craft the composition where is nothing to listen to. I think that is very fun for us as a conductors as well. Well, I want to ask you something very interesting. Right now, we're during this time of COVID. What are you doing at the University of Southern Mississippi? How are you handling this time where singing is restricted and we have some trouble, getting people together and to be safe singing?
Well, I think the first thing you have to realize is that the science on this thing has been a moving target. And so what I'm doing now represents what we knew probably in June and July, because we had a committee at the university that met almost 2 or 3 times a week for us 12-month employees about what to do this fall. And so the science at that time told us that we needed to be in larger rooms with good HVAC systems for air turnover, smaller groups with masks, spaced at least 6, and I chose 8 to 10 feet. I know some people are choosing 12 and 15. Our bands are meeting. In some cases, they have bell covers over the end of the horn so that all the aerosol is caught in the bell cover. Some of the woodwinds actually put their, like a clarinet, they literally have a bag that they play the clarinet in. The clarinet is in a bag, and there's 2 holes for their hands to go in the bag, and they play, and then all the aerosols are contained. Now, I think that what we found is that probably everything we're doing is well beyond what we needed to do at the time. We are having good luck. I mean, I have students that will text me, oh, I know someone who tested positive, I'm going to get tested. But they're not getting it from our group and from our students and from the experience that we're having. And we're very good about contact tracing. I tell them, if you find out somebody was tested positive, they go to the doctor and they get tested or they quarantine. But we have really had a good run of about 3 weeks now, and the bands have as well. At the time our orchestra started, however, they had 3 students before they were even going to have rehearsal that had tested positive. So they put starting off a few days, and they have also had success. But I think the science has changed a little bit. I've been reading a little bit that they think that if you're outside and you keep your distance, odds of getting it are just really very, very small, non-existent. They think if you're inside wearing a mask and to keep your space, you're also still very safe. I think the big news is that if you're in a place that has tight quarters without good air ventilation, people are talking loud, that's when problems really occur. And of course, clubs, bars, things like that have become, and places like that where people don't wear masks or there's close proximity, those are the big areas. And I also, a friend of mine is a doctor, medical physician who sings for me, and they're quite certain now that the amount of exposure you have will also determine the level at which the problems you have if you get tested positive. If you get a lot of the virus, you have pretty serious problems. If you get a little bit, it reduces. So it is an incremental amount of the aerosol you're exposed to. But again, if we talk in another month, I'm quite certain there'll be new things. So we do the best we can. The hard part about all this is that I said this to Patricia, the more skill the singer, sight reading, confidence, the easier we cope with this space and these masks and these numbers. When you get people that are more dependent on a neighbor singing by them and the collective goodness that comes from being in a section of singers, those kind of things, the more difficult this kind of isolation becomes when you are sitting. And I know that my chorale, some of you have heard my chorale, they're not struggling with this. They're not. They're great sight readers. My church choir, a little bit tougher. And I am singing at church, and I do have my loft set up. So there is about 8 feet between singers, and I'm singing with about 20. My community group, however, on Monday nights, we have suspended for the fall. We just felt like for the moment that was the right thing to do. And we have done some things like this where we've come together and talked on Zoom like that, but we've suspended our face-to-face rehearsals. So that's the news here. That's what we're doing.
So how do you, since they're singing with masks and it's separated, how do you feel, rehearsing with them when you cannot see their mouth? How is the sound coming through? Acoustically, how challenging is that?
It's not as bad as I predicted. It's a little muffled, but I can understand what they're saying. I think the biggest thing that you can imagine is sound travels slower than light. Mm-hmm. Therefore, if they're not watching carefully, we have metric mayhem, as it were. As soon as they are visually plugged in, that goes away. And, I have, like right now, I'm working with, my chorale has 4, I call them consorts this fall, of 14 each. I chose a little bit smaller group, 56 to be exact, and I have 4 consorts of 14. Y'all are going to laugh at me, but I told my students my brain is getting more feeble by the day. And so I was very deliberate. I have a blue consort, a red consort, a yellow consort, and an ivory consort. And so I make 6 chamber groups out of those consorts. So when blue and red are together, I call them the purple corps. And when red and yellow are together, I call them the orange corps. And I don't know if you knew this, but when you put blue and yellow together, you get green. They're the green corps. And so ivory and red is the fuchsia corps, ivory and yellow is the harvest corps, and ivory and blue is the aqua corps. So we have 6 different corps, and each chamber choir has a psalm setting they're doing that's a cappella. And then a friend composer, we were talking about composers, a composer out of Missouri that is really a nationally known wind composer, has done 20 settings of Christmas carols that when I looked at them looked pretty straightforward, and now that I'm in the middle of it, they're pretty hard. We're going to record those 20 for a professional recording release next year, and we're doing the first 6. We'll do 6 more when those are done. So each consort has a carol, a psalm setting. Each chamber choir, each consort has a little vocal jazz piece to go on top of that. So there's that layer, the middle layer, and then I have 3 pieces, and about 10 minutes a day, we bring all 56 singers into the big room, and we stand at 8 feet, and we're doing some nice pieces with the big group as well, 3 of them. So it's a really, if you don't sit around and try to compare it to anything else you've ever done, it's okay. If you try to say this is choir, it doesn't quite stack up the same way. So you kind of have to think of what we're doing as a grand experiment. But for us in education, live music making is essential. I have conductors that have to conduct choirs for recitals. So if we don't have choirs singing, they can't even really access their degree requirements. So it's a really important thing for us to be able to do it.
Wow.
That was a long answer. Go ahead.
Wait, so you're saying that at this moment, you are regularly rehearsing with singers, spaced singers in a room, masked.
Yep.
Okay.
Here's
Do
what
you
happens.
use any of those plexiglass things in addition to that or anything like that?
The band does, we do not. But the band is playing instruments that have, by the way, I don't know if you know this, but flute and oboe are in the same class as singing. Aerosols are big with those. But we wear masks. We're about 8 feet apart. So what we do is at 9:30 to 10, I work with those chamber groups. Everybody goes outside for 15 minutes. We let the HVAC systems run. They come back in, and the two groups that were off working as independent consorts in separate rooms, they come to me and they have their rehearsal second, and the two groups I worked with at 9:30 go off and do their different things. So for 3 days, I do different concerts. And then on Thursday, I announce on Wednesday what it is we're going to do. And I attack things that are maybe not as far along as they need to be. And today I did the last 10 minutes with all 56 students. And every day I try to bring them in for just a few minutes of that. And they love that because it's finally the sound they want to hear, which is the chorale, you know. But they're being very patient. I think the students, you know, when I did auditions this fall, I found 2 or 3 students that were stressed about COVID-19, but most of them were stressed about not being able to come together and make music. That was the biggest stress for most of them. Of course, they're in that age group that, you know, COVID-19 is probably the 6th or 7th malady on their list, you know, behind a whole host of other things. You know, I'm the one in jeopardy standing in that room at my age, you know, but they're excited to be there. But I will compliment my students. I told them, I said, you know, if you're not cautious and if you don't do the things you need to do when you don't feel well this fall, it jeopardizes all of us. And they've been very conscientious about that. So far, so good. I'm certain that if, you know, a certain percentage of students were to start testing positive, it would change business quickly at the university. But so far, so good.
Another question.
Okay.
So I am among 4 or 5 of us choir directors at church. At my church oh my God, deep in the we won't wear masks because we're not going to be duped country in Southern Tennessee. My church has managed to keep masks on people at services over their masks. I mean, I'm amazed. Right this minute, and we have them spaced so that family groups are 6 feet apart in the sanctuary. Is it safe for us to say, with your mask on, it is safe to sing the 3 hymns and 2 responses or whatever that we do?
It's interesting you asked. I had that debate with my pastor today. I serve at Parkway Heights. In the Methodist Church, our bishop out of Jackson, Mississippi, kind of put the nix on singing. A lot of
Well, we're Presbyterians, so we boss ourselves.
I got you. And the Presbyterian church that my wife has been playing at has been singing. You know, here's my thing. I have people singing at 8 feet every day. And so far, and we've been doing it for 3 weeks, and we're not seeing any problems with that. But I would tell you, I don't know. I'm doing the best I can with the information I have. And the information I have says CDC would say 6 feet apart with masks on. So I'm doing 8. I know some people that are doing more. And I promise you, if people in my choir started testing positive, we would have a change. But we're doing okay. And I do know churches here that are singing. We have not yet. And that was the debate today I had with my pastor. Are we going to move in that direction? And I do think, again, the science has changed a little bit, but debate for us was, are we calling the bishop or not? What are we doing? I don't know.
What about the HVAC? My son is in that business, and he said no one is talking to them.
Well, we certainly did. We certainly did at the university. It's about both the volume of air in the room and how fast the particular machinery you have can turn that air over. And if you have a lot of volume in a room, if there is any aerosol in there, the percentage is small. If the room is small, then the percentage of it, that's why they don't want you to have more than, say, 25% of capacity in a room. They want, more space. But then if that HVAC system is pretty new and pretty powerful, we have a new HVAC system, for instance, in Bennett Auditorium. Our historic auditorium has a brand new air conditioning system. And they claim that thing will have new air in it in all new air in less than 30 minutes. I mean, it just completely recycled. So it's really how good your equipment is and how big the space is determines how fast that air recycles. And that is a factor in how those aerosols work. It is.
So what do you think the future for choirs and for singing will be, let's say, starting January? Do you think that this will go away soon?
No, I'm going to be the bearer of bad news. Well, here's the thing. I heard an interview about 2 weeks ago with Dr. Fauci. You know who Dr. Fauci is. And I was just completely caught off guard with his answer. Jennifer Garner, the actress Jennifer Garner was interviewing Dr. Fauci, and she said, when can people go back to the theater? And she was talking about New York, of course, Broadway. But his answer was, well, I think if we get a successful vaccine, if people can just wait 1 year.
Yeah.
And I just thought, oh no. But so what I really think is, not only do you have to get the vaccine, and we have a clinical trial going right here in Hattiesburg, maybe you do too, but I do think they're working as quickly as they can. But when we get it, there's got to be some level of success, and then there's got to be the production of that vaccine. Then there's got to be the dissemination of that vaccine. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's a lot of people, if you polled the United States, that would say they still wouldn't take that vaccine. And so I think there's got to be a level of distribution in terms of percentage of the population, the scientists would say, before we can even approach normalcy again. Now, I think the key is, just like we are now, as things change and as we find more about the science, we need to figure out ways to mitigate this thing. Just like now, the science I had in June and July was bigger room, smaller group, 30 minutes at a time, wear masks 8 feet apart. Well, what might be in January is that those numbers and those regulations change some. I can't imagine, though, that we're not still mitigating risk by some type of behavior. But maybe that changes in a way that more of us feel comfortable. You know, the real sad part about this, and the elephant in the room for me, is this virus disproportionately affects certain demographics in the population. And some of those demographics fill up our choir rooms.
Yeah.
You know, what else can I say? And so in my case, I have almost half of my adults in my choir at church. I know this is going to shock everybody, but about half the adults in my choir at church are over the age of 65. Now, some of those folks are coming anyway. You know, they would have been angry had I told them to stay home. They're going to make their own decision, by the way. But there is a large group of my folks that are in their 70s and a couple in their 80s and one in his 90s that are loyal, but they're not coming back till this is over. And you really can't blame them. But not everybody's doing that. I do have some singers that are in their 70s that are already back, and they were chomping at the bit to be back. And they've been there both Wednesday nights that we've rehearsed. And I couldn't keep them away. It wouldn't matter what I'd do, you know, so.
Well, that definitely is something to think about. It, you know.
Patricia, let me say one other thing.
Sure.
I believe that we have a small hole to dig out of right now. I do. My biggest hope and prayer is that next fall, in an academic cycle, and churches, we're all affected by this, that we have some normalcy. I think that if next fall rolls around and we still find ourselves in this kind of limping mode, I don't think the hole doubles. I think the hole triples or quadruples. I think digging out of that hole is going to be harder, because that means another class of students in high school or indoor college aren't doing normal singing. And I think when you start losing one generation, how do you get them back? I think this 1 year we've got something to overcome, but we can do that.
Mhm.
The longer this goes, I think the harder it becomes. That's my theory. Take. So.
Yes, thank you. My theory is like, even though that we have these limitations right now, I think we need to continue really encouraging people to sing, because yes, we
Oh,
don't
yeah.
want to fill in that gap that the people will not sing during 1 year and then everything will fall apart. We need to find solutions of how to sing, how to get the community together, and how to keep singing, because I think it's important not just for the development of the arts, but also for the development of the soul and the spirit, just to lift their spirits, and especially right now that everything is just so dark.
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
Do you
I was just going
mentor him?
Yeah, I have a question.
I was just going to say one thing too. The longer it does go on, I think we have to believe and trust or have faith that alternative solutions will come up, because we're always comparing about what it was and we want it to be that again. It may never be that again. So we have to be willing to say, what can we do different? Or what can we do now that we've never done before? And it may become the next best thing. We don't know. And the longer this goes on, people are going to start to problem solve and try to figure out what is that next thing that we have to do. Where are we going to go from here with these chains that we have at the moment?
Well, and technology will continue to offer us better solutions too. You've already seen that we don't have yet quite what we need for a virtual rehearsal, but technology is better than it was just a couple of years ago. So things get better. Somebody else had a.
And I got to say this, after 30 years in my church of trying to get people to sing during the hymns, we're finally having to tell them not to sing, and they realize they miss it. And I'm like, well, maybe you guys will be ready to sing when we can again.
You tell you tell my friend Mac hello for me before you leave out there tonight.
Oh yeah. Hey Mac.
That was the question that Kay's supposed to ask you. The relationship that you have with Mac Wilbur.
Oh yeah.
Oh well, Mac's a good friend.
Years ago,
That's who I was talking about. I could just.
Yeah, but years ago I got to crash a rehearsal with them. I sang a full rehearsal with them as a second soprano, because that's the person I knew, and that's how I got in. I was a reporter at the time, so that was an experience of a lifetime. But tell me how you know him.
Well, Mac was coming back in March. I've had him here 3 times. We're very good friends, and in fact, when they do their Christmas show, he's had me out on a few occasions for rehearsals to sit and listen and critique, because I do choral orchestral work. But Mac and we talk about once a month on the phone. We've just become very good friends. So.
And I know the Southern Chorale performed The Prodigal. Is that right? Is that the?
Actually,
Yes.
Actually, it was my community group that did The Prodigal. So yeah. I just called him one day because Mac is so busy, as you know, writing hymn arrangements, and for that choir week in, week out, he has not had the time to write major works, extended works. So I invited him to write for us a multi-movement work. And it was,
Is it any good? Should we do it?
I think it's good. The thing that's interesting about the work is that rather than having solo recitatives, he really gives the aria recitative type of material to the choir. And there's these sections. Yeah, I like it a lot. It's been recorded now by the choir at Temple Square, and you can get it and listen and decide what you think of it. But it's good work. It's probably 18, 20 minutes maybe.
Kelly, you had a question?
Yeah, I was going to ask, you mentioned that you now start doing about 40 to 50% of what you do is modern. Can you share some of those composers that you
of my major
are
works with orchestra
coming and who someone who likes to listen to choral music can listen to? I'd love to hear some names.
I missed some of that question. Does she want to know composers?
Yes, composers that you
Okay.
recommend that we could listen to, that you think are great, they're up
Well,
and coming, that you really focus on, and just to give us a
well, first of all, let me do a
forward
disclaimer.
looking.
Yeah, I'll do a disclaimer in that some of the things I do probably are not as accessible for some groups, and some of them weren't even accessible to me. After I got them, I thought, what have I done? I did an American Requiem by Ed Penorwood. He's out of Indiana. Ed is past retirement age, but Ed was a student of a German composer by the name of Heinz Zimmermann. I like Ed's work a lot. He's such a skilled writer of melody, but I got to tell you, that was the hardest 70 minutes of music I've taught outside of the Bach B minor Mass. And any group who would take that on would need a huge orchestra and lots of rehearsal time. I've done a lot of work by a young man by the name of Tonu Kurvitz, Tonu Korvits. He's about 51 or 52, which is young, I suppose. I've done 3 works by him. One of them was a world premiere, 2 were US premieres. But the one that is so accessible to like a choir like yours would be the Crake's Notebook. 8 movements. There are y'all hearing me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, you're all frozen in time. But there's
We're
8 movements, and only one of them, what I say, is a college level difficulty thing.
Would you repeat that? It's the what move? The Cricks?
Crake's Notebook, Kreek''S Notebook. And I'll tell you, the piece is interesting because Kirillus Craik was a composer through the Cold War in Estonia. And of course, if you know anything about communism in that time, church is really not a viable thing. They kept people from going to church. So he went into the countryside with students from the university, and they transcribed hymns. And this is 8 movements of hymns. You could do any 6 or 7 or 8 of them you wanted to do, but they are singable, and they're really, really wonderful tunes. And Estonian is teachable, very constant vowel movement. I've done works by John Cheatham. John Cheatham is a brass composer out of Missouri, well known for a lot of things. And I've done works by James Mulholland. I did the Missa Romantica. I did both an a cappella version, and then last year 2 years ago, I recorded the orchestral version. It was very exciting. The thing I'd say about all of this is that I think that conductors have limited opportunities on the podium of the orchestra. And then they also always have to make box office. And so there's a lot of pressure to pick things that both singers want to sing and that the buying public will buy a ticket for. And being at a university, sometimes I can ignore those constraints and do some things.
Any other questions that you have?
I was wondering if there are composers doing works for women's voices, SSA or 4-part women's voices. I have a hard time finding things that I think are interesting and not, they tend to be a little sappy, high school-like. And I was wondering if there's people out there doing interesting things with women's voices.
I don't disagree with that. When I need women's music, I tend to go online and I tend to try to YouTube things like All-State performances or university ensembles that have women's choruses, and I'll see what they're singing, because I know that a lot of those conductors have gone through stacks of music and have done a lot of work that I don't want to do, but they've come up with the good pieces. And most states these days have good all-state women's groups. And so I'll YouTube to see if I can find those performances, and I'll just kind of let somebody else do that work for me. I do the same thing with men's chorus. I know a lot about SATB literature, but when it comes to those specialty choruses, I've started using the new technology of YouTube and performances to find things. But, you know, Florida All-State, Kentucky All-State, any All-State, just say YouTube, you know, Alabama All-State women, whatever All-State women, and go and listen to their performances. You'll find some probably remarkable literature. So.
Talking about Pennoldwood, I have the privilege to work on that one. I guess my year there at USM, and it was amazing. I love that piece. I still have the recording. I think the recording can be found in iTunes of the Mass. Is that right, Dr. Fuller?
Yeah, and I still have some discs at the school. If somebody were to write me, I could certainly send them one. So, yeah.
Hey, speaking of the school, tell us about when Patricia was in school and you had to break her of all her bad habits and stuff, because she's pretty good now.
You know, Patricia showed up, I can't remember, like 05, 06, what was it, 04? Did you go to Los Angeles with me, Patricia? I just can't. Patricia came for a master's in conducting and a master's in voice, and it's been a while ago. We've aged together, as it were. Patricia was just rock solid, great musician, really quick on her feet in front of a choir, and she's the singer's singer. You know, if I ever had any problems with Patricia, if she's so conscious of vocal production that she wants to give 50 voice lessons when she's got that choir right there, because she's so good at dealing with voice issues. You know, I'd say, Patricia, there's a choir there, you know, and but Patricia was a great student from southeastern Louisiana.
Yeah.
And I knew her conductor from college. Dirk Garner and I were friends and still are, but he's gone up to Baldwin Wallace now. So Patricia was a great student. And Kathleen Buckner, also a great student, sitting up at the top of the screen.
Hi, Dr. Fuller.
Katie, how are you? And I now have a Kahaya Buckley in chorale.
Oh no!
So I'm got the, yeah. So
I'm doing all
thank
right,
you all
though.
for letting me come and see you tonight.
Oh,
I am inspired.
So can I ask before you go, since we're reminiscing, do you remember about 40 years ago who your roommate was at OBU first semester senior year?
Oh my gosh, are you talking Craig Phillips?
No. That would be me.
Who would that be?
Tim Lewis.
Tim
I
Lewis?
told Patricia he wouldn't remember.
Well, Tim, it's been a long time ago. I do remember, you know, I went through so many roommates, they all left me. Craig Phillips, all these different people. What are you doing in Huntsville?
Well, I was working for a defense company like most everybody else who lives in the area.
It seems to me there's another gal we went to school with there, a little composer gal that went to OBU that's in the Huntsville area. I can't think of her name though. I'll have to look it up and get back to you. So,
okay.
Well, I've stuck with this music all these years. I don't know how to do anything else. I wasn't really qualified for anything else in life. So
I used it as a hobby, so.
The organist at First Baptist Church used to be a lady by the name of Sherry. I don't know her maiden name. Sherry Wright now, but she graduated from OBU.
I think you're talking about Dr. Fuller, the director of Decatur High School. Stacy, Carl, that I think he went to USN.
No, it's not it.
No?
That's not it.
Are you talking about
Yeah, I've
Butler?
seen her name
Um,
somewhere.
I can't
Well,
think
anyway,
of
I'm
her
inspired
last
to
name.
see all of you here, and I wish you well. And I hope that we'll be back in Huntsville someday soon with the Southern Chorale, and I'll be able to see all of you again.
That would be great.
Thank you, Dr. Fuller, for coming in, and I wish you the best. Good luck with all the activities that you have, and thank you again for joining us here.